So now we have our board panel and board component working together. They can communicate with each other, where we can select the game mode in the board panel component, and our board component is going to display the tiles. But what I want is to have better tiles here. I want to have some big tiles and they should hide these words behind them. For that, I'm going to create another component which I'll call the block component. Let me close all these files and let's create another Aura component. Let's name our component as block, and this component is going to involve a lot of CSS, but I'll try my best to explain each and every CSS properties to you guys. So first I'm going to have an attribute here which is going to hold the label that we want to hide or the text that we want to hide. So it should be of string type, and let's let it be as public attribute. Then I'm going to have another attribute which should be like open, and this attribute is a flag which tells me whether this tile is open or not, and I'm going to mark it as boolean type, so it will be either true or false. Then I'm going to have a div container here or a div element. So let's use a div element. I'm going to call it block tile or block tile container. Now within this div tag, I'm going to have another div tag where I'll display my text. So let's access our label attribute here. So the parent div tag will act as a container. The second div tag is going to hold my label value. So what I want to do now is I want to assign some CSS properties to my parent div tag, because if I deploy this code now, it will be very similar to how our component is looking at the moment. It will be plain text. Let me actually show this to you guys. Let's go back to our board component, and here when we were using these lighting layout items, instead of accessing this word directly here, we can access our block component. So the way we were accessing our board component from the board panel component, we are going to do the same thing with our block component as well. So here I'll use c:block, and then I can pass the label value which is a public attribute here. So this label value should be equals to this word that we have here. So let's access its value. Remember, you do not need to use your value provider here because you are within the Aura iteration. Now let me also mark my open attribute default as false, because by default this is not open. This will only be set to true when a user will click on this text. Let's save our board component as well, and let's deploy all our components. So I think we should see the similar output that we were seeing before, because so far we haven't written any CSS for our block component. Let's select a game mode and click on start new game. So still we are seeing the similar output, but this time it's not a plain text, it's coming from our block component. So now our board panel component is the grandparent component which has this board component in it, and this board component has this multiple blocks component in it. So let's stylize these blocks, and to do that let's open our DevTools, and here let's select one of these tiles. So you can click on this picker right here on the top left corner and pick any of these words or any of these tiles. Now this is going to select our text, but what we are interested in is the parent div tag that we've created, which is our container div tag. So let's add some custom CSS properties to it. For that you need to click on this element.style tag that you see here. Just click anywhere here and then you'll be able to insert your text. The first property that I want to insert is the background, because I want to change the background color. So it should be completely white. Then I want to change the height of this tile. So let's fix it to maybe 100 pixels. So now we have got a bigger tiles. Maybe 80 pixels will do. Then let's add a border to it. For that you need to use the border property. It should be 1 pixel border, solid, and it should again be white. I also want to give my border a radius, so it should be border radius, and let's give it maybe 4 pixels. So now if you'll notice, it's a bit rounded. Let's change our font to uppercase. So we are going to use text transform, which we have used before as well. And we are going to change our text to uppercase. I'm also going to give some space between these letters. For that we need to use letter spacing property. And let's give it maybe 1 pixel. Yeah, that looks fine. I also want to change my cursor to a pointer when I hover over this item. So for that I'm going to use my cursor property and I'm going to change it to pointer. As soon as you do that, notice how the cursor changes. From an arrow it becomes a pointer. Then let's give some font weight to as well. I want to change my font weight to maybe like bold. Okay, looks better. And let's give a font size as well. Maybe large. Where is it? Yeah. I'll also give this a box shadow. That means there will be some shadow behind each and every tile. For that we need to use box shadow property. And here I have pasted some properties which give some nice box shadow to it. Along with these custom CSS properties, let's also add some standard SLDS classes. So let's click on this .cls button or text, and then you will see this input window where you can select an SLDS class. So first I want to align my text in absolute center. So let's use SLDS align absolute center. So we are going to use this class, and now our text is in absolute center. I also want to give it some padding. So for that we need to use SLDS, then where, then T, then around medium. That should do. And let's give some margin to it as well. So use SLDS where M around medium. So I think we are going to use the combination of standard SLDS classes and these custom CSS properties. If you are wondering from where do I know about these standard SLDS classes, then you can check out this lightningdesignsystems.com website, and from here you can learn about the SLDS classes. For example, if you expand this utilities section and click on alignment, you will know that we have a standard SLDS align absolute center class which position the text in absolute center vertically and horizontally as well. So this is the best place to learn about all the SLDS classes. Now our job is to copy all these properties and actually paste them inside our component. So let's go to our VS Code and we need to open the CSS file of blog component. Remember, our parent div container is the direct child of this Aura component. Let's give it a class as maybe board block. Along with this, you can have multiple classes as well to the same element. You just need to give a space before you add another class. So first we are going to copy all the standard classes that we have added here. So let's copy them. Let's remove this one, it's not necessary. So here I have this custom class and then 3 of the SLDS classes. Just make sure that you give space in between each and every class that you'll add. Now for this board block class that we are assigning here, we need to give some custom CSS properties. And since this div is the direct child of our Aura component, we do not need to give any space between our this keyword and our class name. Now let's copy all the CSS properties from our browser window. So here let's select everything, copy it and paste here. And let's save our code. So I think this should work. I also want to do one more thing. When I hover over an item, I want to change its background color. So if I'll go back to my other Salesforce org, you will notice that when I move over a tile, its background changes, right? So this is called hover effect, and we are going to define this hover effect for our board block class. So let's go back to our block.css file, and here let's copy this, and after your CSS class name you need to use a colon and then the effect name, which is hover, and here you can define all the hover properties. So first I want to change the background color, so let's do that. Here I want to give somewhat grayish background, so this should be the color code. And I also want to change the border color, so let's have 1 pixel border, solid, and let's change the color to the same that we are having in this background color. And when this background color changes, I want to give some transition effect as well. For example, when I hover over this item, it takes some time to change this color. So there is some nice smooth transition effect, right? We can achieve the same using the transition property in our board block class. So let's use the transition property here, and I want to give this transition property to all the effects, and it should take 0.5 seconds to change the CSS properties to this one. So now we can save our code and let's deploy our changes. Hopefully we should see our nice and stylized board blocks. Let's refresh our page, select a game mode and click on start new game. So now we have got all our tiles and they all are changing their colors when we hover over them. The cursor is also changing from an arrow to pointer. But our next job is to hide these words behind these tiles, and they should only appear when the user clicks on it. And this should be very straightforward because we have done similar thing in past as well. So what we need to do, we need to have an on-click handler to our parent div container. And here we are going to define an on-click handler. Let's call it block click handler. Remember that you use C here, which represents our controller file. And then we can open the controller file of our block component, and here we can create this block click handler method. Now what I want to do is, when a user clicks on this block, I want to change this open attribute to true, which is set to false by default. So first let's get the current value of this open attribute. Let's name it open, and we can get its value using the get method. So here it will return the current value of this open attribute, and if this is equals to false, so it is like if it is equals to false, then we can set it to true. And let's set it to true. In place of writing triple equals to false, you can also short it and you can write something like this. If open is false, then you can use not operator, and it is the same thing that we were doing before. So that's it. Now my next job is to hide this text using aura if. So I'll only show this text when this open attribute is set to true. So let's have an aura if component here, and the expression would be to check this open attribute's value, and if it is true, then I'm going to show my text. So easy, right? So when a user will click on this tile, this attribute will be set to true, and once this will be set to true, we'll be able to see our label. And by default we'll not be able to see it because by default this open is set to false. Now we can deploy our component and we can see the change there. Let's start a new game, and none of our tile is showing the text here. If you click on the tile, then the text will appear. And this is exactly what we wanted. Now in the next video, we are going to work on this mouse left counter. Like whenever a user is clicking on these tiles, this mouse left should be decreased and we should check if the user has won or not. The only challenge that we have is that this calculation is happening in the board component, which is the parent component. And when we click on these tiles, it's a child component, which is this block component. So we need some communication channel between our block component and the board component. We should be able to indicate on which tile we are clicking and what is the word behind it, so that our board component can check if the user has won or not and how many moves are left. And we will achieve this with the help of component events in Aura framework.